Okay, bit of a different video today. I'm making this video because I get asked this quite a lot by people inside of Microsoft and also customers, and it seems a fairly interesting topic to talk about, the relevance of CCIE today in the context of cloud and cloud networking becoming more popular. So let's try and unpack it. Do I think it's still worth it if I was to sort of be perhaps 15, 20 years earlier in my career, would I pursue the CCIE today with the current networking landscape? Of course, this is coming from my perspective. I might do a future video actually where I talk to other folks with the CCIE certification who are working in cloud roles to get their opinion. But of course, I'm biased. I've got a certain set of experiences. I work for a CSP. I certainly have an element of survivor bias. I've gone down a certain road. It's worked out okay for me, but who knows, right? Everyone sort of treads their own path. If you're watching this video and maybe you've never heard of CCIE, if you're in networking, probably you have. But if you're coming at this more from a cloud architect perspective, maybe you're more from the app side or the data side, or you come from a traditional Microsoft background, then maybe you won't have heard of CCIE. Certainly, there's a lot of people, probably most people inside of Microsoft, haven't heard of this certification. CCIE is sort of synonymous with an expert level of certification for networking. So it does stand for Cisco Certified Internet Networking Expert. Cisco have done a really, really good job of, in my opinion, doing a couple of things with this certification. They've done a really good job of the marketing. It's become kind of the mark for that people aspire to, but it drives a lot of value, in my opinion. So it's not only useful from a marketing perspective for Cisco, it's the people that pursue the certification. The syllabus is a good framework for learning about networking. I think it's at the appropriate level of complexity. You know, it encourages good behavior in terms of the learning and the diligent sort of practices you need to get the certification, which we'll touch on in a little bit. And as well as having the CCIE, it's not just you go straight for CCIE. In Cisco land, there's varying degrees of certification. So you start off with perhaps a CCNA, which is like the entry level exam, and then that's kind of like a multi-choice test. You go to a testing center and pass that. Then there's a set of exams to get the professional level, CCNP, which again is more of the same. It's more a kind of prometric style, multi-answer style questions. And then there's probably fair to say an order of magnitude jump to CCIE, which is more of it's going to take you a bit longer. Normally takes people 6 months to 2 years to achieve. And this involves passing another written exam in one of these test centers. But the bulk of the work comes in last time I checked, it was a 8-hour hands-on lab. You have to go to a special testing center around the world, and you sit in front of a keyboard and you have to configure things, troubleshoot things. You can't take a book in with you, so it's very much a rudimentary test of do you know it or do you not. Okay, so why am I making this video now? Well, as I said, I get a lot of questions about it, but also I just got an email off Cisco a couple of weeks ago saying, well done, you've maintained your certification for 10 years, and therefore you can now get a shiny plaque like this, and you can also enter a program they have called the Emeritus program, which is really nice, especially if you're no longer hands-on with Cisco every single day, because the Emeritus program allows you to sort of maintain your pseudo-active status with the CCIE, where you pay a bit of money every year and you don't completely lose your certification. So it offers that safety net. And that's certainly what I'll be doing moving forward, because having worked for Microsoft nearly 4 years, and even before then, I wasn't plugging in a console cable to a Cisco device every single day anymore. That was very much a thing I did more 10 years ago. A point of note that is quite interesting here, I believe Neil Moore is quite a famous CCIE in the industry. I think he might have 7 or 8 of these CCIEs, and there's definitely only a handful of people that have that many of these certifications. A little bit more history. It's been around since 1993, so it's gone through a lot of iterations. But the thing that's always been a common trend is it's had this hands-on element, and that's added to its sort of status in the industry, because having to go through this exam, it's not something that you can do very easily. There's no real shortcuts. You have to get hands-on for a lot of time. One of the things that I think is really valuable about it is, yes, it's a marketing vehicle for Cisco. Yes, they've done an excellent job there. Yes, it teaches an element of Cisco-specific knowledge, but it's very fair in that it teaches the foundational side of networking as well. So as part of a CCNA, you're going to learn about things like TCP/IP, routing packets versus switching frames, basic firewalling, load balancing, these sort of fundamental topics which help you reason from first principles as a network engineer, and help you design more clearly and think more clearly as a networking architect. I think it's fair to say that Cisco are still the dominant player in on-premises physical networks, and that's the primary focus of their business, of which they have various sectors, which is reflected in the different CCIE certification tracks. For example, you can do routing and switching, which is kind of the traditional one that most people do. I think that's now called enterprise. But you can also specialize in security, wireless, service provider networks. There used to be a voice certification. There's probably some others that I'm missing. But these are all technology stacks which are implemented primarily with on-premises equipment. Now, I think there is a data center track or a cloud track which will cover things like Cisco ACI, and ACI is a networking construct that Cisco does stretch into the cloud. But I would say this is the exception to the rule. Cisco is still the primary leader in on-premises network equipment. And that's why people ask this question, right? So is pursuing a certification that is delivered by the market leader for on-premises networking, is that worth doing when I'm having frequently more conversations about networking where the center of gravity is moved to cloud? Okay, let's think about it. So sort of a spoiler here would be, well, I think it depends. I think the answer to the question of is CCI still relevant, should I pursue it, is, well, it depends. It depends on what are the incentives at play. So why do you want to do this? I'm going to break this down into 3 areas. So the first one would be, and I think it's very fair to have an honest conversation about these, because they're all valid reasons to look at doing an advanced level certification that's going to consume a lot of your time. So you want to make sure that you're going into it for the right reasons, and the effort you put in will be worth it in the long run. So the first one would be the technical knowledge. And this is where I would come back to the comment that I made around, I think Cisco do a very good job of giving you, when you step through their various levels of certification, CCNA, CCNP, CCIE, even through to the more advanced ones like the CCDE, and I think there's a CCAR. I think they capture very well the base networking foundations, which do transfer over to cloud. So to have a good networking conversation in cloud, it very much helps to have an understanding of frames and packets and firewalls and load balancers and BGP, and being able to trace a packet from left to right on a diagram, understanding things like network resilience, and all of that applies to the let's say the virtual world of cloud, where the paradigms of network design have changed slightly. And let's not forget that there is always a physical hybrid element to cloud. So you're probably going to be designing your cloud network to connect back to on-premises networks, where all of this knowledge that you pick up is still going to be relevant. And there's a high chance that on-premises network, the WAN, the cloud edge, will be comprised of Cisco equipment. there's an element here of technical knowledge. I would say, well, how far do you want to take that? Because you could pursue the CCNA, let's say, pursue the CCNA in a way, in a method of what I would class as a high degree of personal integrity. So you don't go anywhere near brain dumps. You look at the CCNA syllabus as a menu, and you want to consume every one of those items on the menu thoroughly for you to understand them. All of those things that you pick up, they're going to be pretty good knowledge for cloud. The point where I'd sort of double click on this is, well, once you have that base foundations of the CCNA, you then have a decision to make on picking up more knowledge. Do you want to double down on the Cisco knowledge and the traditional networking knowledge? And that's where the CCIE tracks would offer you that. We now, with cloud, have another career avenue, which is you get the base networking foundations for a program like CCNA, and you get the associated experience on, working at a help desk, working in a network engineer role, working in a network architect role. But then you hop over to a cloud track. You say, okay, I want to apply this base that I have through the lens of a cloud provider. Could be multiple cloud providers or single cloud provider. So I think that's where you sort of need to make the decision on a personal level. Okay, let's think about the second one. So the second one is, I'm going to say status or kind of the generic value of an expert level certification like the CCIE, not only externally but internally. Of course, the external value is easier to sort of quantify, and this is to sort of be frank about, well, the CCIE's got a lot of weight. If people know that you've passed this exam, that means certain things. That's okay. You can pursue it for that reason. It does open doors for careers. It might get you that interview. It might get you that job, especially at partners where there's incentives for partners to still have a certain number of CCIEs. But if you also look internally into yourself, and this is one of my learnings, is that by passing something that's really hard to do, and not only other people know it's hard to do, but you know it's hard to do, it tells you something about yourself. It tells you that you can stay the course. You can have taken something that was previously on a pedestal, and you've broken it down into manageable chunks over a period of time to reach a goal, and you've shown yourself that you can do that. That process in itself is more valuable, in my opinion, than the pure technical knowledge, because it shows yourself what you can achieve, and that's going to map to many other challenges in the future. Because the technical knowledge, that will kind of fade away. Do I still configure OSPF stub areas on a daily basis? No. Could I do that without looking at the documentation now? Absolutely not. Do I still use some of the learning methodologies that I put in place to pass the CCIE? Yes. Do I build upon that confidence that it gave me? Definitely. So this is I think is one of the areas that I think is possibly timeless in its value. And then let's talk about remuneration. Well, we go to work to not only hopefully enjoy what we do, but we go to work to earn money to pay for other aspects of our life. And I think we're all very privileged in IT and network engineering. We get to do interesting things and drink free coffee in a warm environment. So if you want to optimize your career for remuneration, then I think it's worth questioning it. So let's say you are that, you've done 5 years, you've got a CCNP, you're between the age of 25 and 30, and your goal is, well, I want to maximize my income. Should I pursue the next 2 to 3 years picking up a CCIE, or should I spend the next 2 to 3 years specializing in a different domain? And that domain could be cloud. It could be building SaaS applications. It could be being a multi-cloud expert. It could be being a SD-WAN expert. I think there's more opportunities now these days to not just go double down, go hard on the pure routing and switching angle and CCIE. There's other angles. So I think this is one angle worth considering, because in the past, to reach perhaps the higher levels of salary when it came to network engineering, CCIE was a rite of passage. But I think now you do have that opportunity where get the foundations, get a CCNA, get a CCNP, and then hop the cloud and become an expert in that area, combine those things, and you might be able to fast track your acceleration up the salary curve. And the reason for that fundamentally is cloud is a newer industry, right? If you come in, get your feet under the table with a cloud provider or a partner working with cloud, you can become an expert in that domain in 2 to 5 years, and you're not competing against people that have done it for 30 years because the industry hasn't existed for 30 years. So in that respect, cloud is somewhat of a leveler for network engineering because cloud engineering for networking is different to on-prem network engineering. There's a lot of overlap, but there's a lot of specifics you need to pick up. So I'd say the third angle around remuneration, there's some value there to questioning the CCIE path. Okay, let's try and wrap this up. So CCIE and cloud, is it still relevant? If we look back at those three things, I would say you can be a very, very competent network engineering cloud and have gone nowhere near the CCIE. In fact, a lot of the best people that I know in cloud networking specifically, have not got a CCIE. They are just, they understand networking, they understand cloud, they're high in conscientiousness, they're very good sort of wide abstract thinkers, and they're just very diligent and they understand things from first principles. But that said, this point here around the status and generic impact of a CCIE, if you're earlier in your career, you're perhaps 25, could you spend the next 2 or 3 years getting that CCIE? Is that going to stand you in good stead for the long term in a career that might last you to 60, 65? I think yes, there's a lot of value there, personal value. I think the generic sort of, hey, I can learn in this way, because there still isn't a cloud networking certification which has the same status, difficulty, and therefore won't have the same internal gratification to you. So in that respect, I would give it a lot of consideration, especially if you place a lot of value on, I just want to learn this inside out. I really want to go to the nth degree of detail and go, really understand the technical side. Whereas if you want to understand the technical side well enough and then combine it with other skills like soft skills, business awareness, architecture, enterprise architecture, then maybe it's less relevant. Okay, well, I don't really think I answered the question. So sorry, I gave you it depends answer. But if you're thinking about the same thing, maybe you are that 25-year-old. Hopefully you found this interesting. If you're somebody who's perhaps near a 45, 50 and have been on these paths, and perhaps you might have different thoughts, please let me know in the comments. Thanks a lot. Thanks for joining me and agreeing to do this and sort of chat about CCIE and cloud for 10, 15 minutes. And by now, you've seen the video I made and my thoughts, and people watching this would have seen the video that I made. And I really wanted to make sure we got other people's opinions because there's we chatted about it briefly, right? And you had some great insights. So maybe just to tee this up is sort of maybe get into a bit of your background with the CCIE, how you arrived at Microsoft, and then in the second half we can unpack the actual answer to the question.
Sure. Um, so my background, I go way back and I am old school. So I got my CCIE back in 1996, and my CCIE number is actually 2291. So that would make me among the first 1,300 CCIEs because they started issuing the number at about a thousand something. So back when I got my CCIE, I was working at a financial services organization in New York City, and it was just something I wanted to go for. I saw we were building these extranets connecting customers, and I thought I wanted to get deeper and really learn more. So I got my CCIE, and back then it was just called CCIE. There was no CCIE data center versus CCIE security. I believe my CCIE was first grandfathered in um, it was called routing and switching, CCIE routing and switching, and then now I think it grandfathered into CCIE enterprise. So that was late 1996. By by 2000, I had joined Cisco, and I decided I would try to get another CCIE. Now that there were several more, I want to say at the time there was CCIE routing and switching, which is what I had grandfathered into. But there were also CCIE WAN, I want to say, and CCIE ISP dial. And I flew up to Halifax and got my CCIE, my second CCIE in ISP dial. So that's the journey of my CCIE experience. And in fact, I spent a little time finding this, but when I got my original CCIE, if you'll see this, they sent me this cool little toolkit. I just want to show some cool stuff here.
I've never seen one of these.
You know, they stopped giving out bomber jackets by I guess the first 100 or 1,000. Oh, I realize maybe you can't see this too well, but let me just describe it. So I have what I think is super cool is not only do I have like these cool screwdrivers. This is the CCIE of the old days, right? They gave me this thing so I can pull out those chips for those old timers who remember the original um, Cisco AGS and had to like change the proms. I had to on that shift. So, so
I thought it was a
just
crimping tool
completing
at
my
first.
story and my journey and my history. And I believe the logo might have changed a little bit, but this is what I received back in late 1996. So,
That's amazing. That's amazing. What is that? Is that for managing actual hardware? I mean, what's that stuff?
well, I guess the idea is you're supposed to be hands-on, right? And I should mention, as you're asking me questions about CCIE, I mean, given I got my CCIE in 1996 and 2000, my knowledge is obviously dated, right? I mean, the exams are very confidential, rightfully. So but back when I took the exam in 1996, it was very, very hands-on. It was a 2-day exam, and you had to build in day one, and there was actually cabling involved. And and this is where I will share. You can't see me on video, but I am 5 foot, so I actually had a hard time um, reaching the upper shelves, the routers that were on the upper shelves. And I think my proctor took pity on me. So might have been a little bit easier on me on the troubleshooting section because I was like, look, I can't get to this. I need a zip store.
What kind of
Anyway,
cables
just
were there? Well, they weren't Ethernet.
um, I want to say we there were WAN and LAN cables. Yeah, I mean I want to say, wow. Now I'm thinking. So it would not have been gigabit Ethernet, right? I mean, back in
I think it might be token ring or
1996.
something like that.
Um, now that I think about it, on my exam, there might have been token ring because I want to say I was one of the last batch that had questions including Novell SAP IPX. So there might have been token ring, but of course, the exam has changed since then, and it's a 1-day exam, and it's mostly simulated environment, right? There should be no cabling. Um,
Yeah, there definitely
that's
wasn't for
just
me
too
when I
time
did
consuming.
mine. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
So
maybe just accelerate to kind of the current day and kind of how you went from Cisco to working in cloud, and if you still have a CCIE, is it still active? And that would be interesting to know those answers.
sure. Um, so I do still have my CCIE. Um, After 2000, I did I chose not to go for another lab exam because that really is quite intensive. So every 2 years, I took the recert until I want to say about 2010, at which point I went emeritus.
Sure.
And I believe back in 2020, 2020 or even 2019, they issued the lifetime emeritus. Actually, that might have even been earlier. So I turned emeritus because my role had essentially changed. The CCIE, as you know, in order to get the CCIE, you really have to be very hands-on. You need to know how to troubleshoot. Not only do you need to put together a network, you really need to be able to troubleshoot and really know how to debug situation and scenarios. And over the years, I had moved to more of a um, design and architecture role. And so it actually got to the point where not only did I realize I would not get, say, another CCIE because it just requires so much hands-on, and I just was not in that type of a role anymore, and I did not have the time to get as deep as I would have liked to, right? I mean, it's a matter of how much time you really have. Um, so I continue to take the test every 2 years to keep an active CCIE. And then shortly after, they offered the emeritus deal, which is offered once you have had your CCIE for 10 years. So if I do the math, it should mean you would have had to take a written test 4 times after you pass the CCIE, right? Because with the CCIE, you get 2 years and then you take a recertification every 2 years. Um, I just chose to go emeritus. And last year, I think they offered this thing. So not only is it lifetime emeritus, it's like seriously lifetime emeritus, so that you don't even need to go in and renew your status as emeritus. It used to be before 2019, you needed to say, yes, over the past year, I have contributed to the networking community by writing white papers. I've done this, I've done that. So you just kind of attest to the fact that you've contributed to the networking community. They removed that requirement, and I want to say um, my CCIE is now lifetime emeritus through the year 2099, I think was what they set it for. So, yes, so I'm
That
good for
sounds
a
pretty
while.
safe.
It is safe.
I think that means you could always go back and resit a written exam, and you can kind of reactivate, can't you, into a
Yes,
fully active CCIE.
yes, yes, yes,
That's interesting. And I think one of the things that came to mind there where you were talking was you highlight something which is sometimes forgotten, which is that the CCIE assesses your primarily hands-on ability to configure those devices and troubleshoot those devices on that day, and
yes,
is very sort of representative of a hands-on role. But
yes,
in the industry, the CCIE is or was kind of still seen as a ticket to perhaps more senior architect roles, where, as you rightly said, you need a completely different tool set to which you needed to pass the actual lab exam. And I mean, perhaps that would lead us nicely into when we think about the CCI today in terms of the increasing relevance of cloud networking. How do you see that in your head, the map in between the relevance of that certification now and the sort of changing landscape of networking?
So certainly the networking landscape has changed, which was why I joined Microsoft. I really wanted to work in cloud. Um, I would say a few things. I mean, CCIE, I heard it referred to on the show Shark Tank, if you're familiar with it. There was a gentleman who came up with an idea, and he was introduced as CCIE, and his partner introduced that role as basically the PhD for networking. So I would say there is relevance in multiple ways. I mean, there's relevance in that it really is a certain pedigree, and it really gives you some credibility right off the bat. I mean, I know I have gone into interviews where the interviewer said, "Oh, you have CCIE. I don't need to." Um, I don't need to ask you technical questions because one, I know you know this information, and two, even if you don't know this specific information, I would like to ask you, I know you have the aptitude to pick it up very quickly. Which I guess brings me to my second point of, um, at least back when I was looking at the CCIE in the early 2000s, and based upon what I've observed on the forums, CCIE remains one of the best, if not the best, training forums. I mean, it really gets you in, it really allows you to understand what's the protocols, what's running underneath the covers, and some of the issues that you might have, right? I mean, in order to pass the CCIE successfully, I think you really need to understand the foundations, which are still relevant. That is IP networking, that is TCP flow control, like really the fundamentals of that. Sure, the networking landscape has changed so that we're trying to make networking easier, right? So we're trying to make networking more of a black box so that, through automation, through cloud, you get the services that you want. But I think depending on your role, there is still great relevance to um, pursuing the learning track that ends in a CCIE. Um, Now, the question of whether you should go for a CCIE, um, I think I'm going to give the typical network engineer answer. I think it's similar to the one that you gave, is it depends, right? Um, it really is a huge commitment of time and resources, and it's not right for everyone. I mean, if you're going to be in a design role, um, if you want to learn the fundamentals of networking, I would say probably going for the CCNA or CCNP, that's the associate and professional levels of Cisco certification, is probably sufficient to give you the theory and the design aspects. And it's up to the individual to decide, well, once I have my CCNP, do I want to get the Azure Solution Architect exam? Because I'm very, very excited about learning more about Azure in the cloud, or do I get the AWS solution architect associate certification, right? I mean, there's no absolute right or wrong answer. It really depends on the person, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's definitely more options these days. Um, okay, that's great. I mean, thanks for sharing all of your insights. One of the things I've sort of noted along the way there was we didn't actually cover the sort of the new role that you have in Microsoft. And so one of the things that I've learned working at Microsoft is there's all these interesting people, some of which have a similar background working at Cisco, and someone with your pedigree who's now in this kind of pivotal role for networking at Microsoft. So, maybe you want to spend 30 seconds just sharing what you're doing now and how that maps to sort of networking going forward.
Sure. So, actually, I think I should just add that when I was offered a role at Microsoft, I really did not have a lot of depth with Azure networking at all. I did come in with AWS Solution Architect Associate certification, but I do think the fact that I had the CCIE had something to do with my getting offered a role. I don't know. I probably need to ask my hiring manager, who, oh, I love her. She's absolutely wonderful. Um, so I think that that points to how significant the CCIE still is in the industry. But getting back to what I've done since then. So I joined as a networking global black belt. I had to learn Azure networking deeply, very, very quickly, and I did that. And I was in that role for about 2.5 years, where the role essentially entailed looking at customer designs, trying to optimize them, um, pointing out possible um, problems they may run into 6 months down the line. And that was a wonderful role where I got to talk to customers in all industries and in all time zones in the US. So, what I love about Microsoft was 2.5 years in, the opportunity to move into a business strategy role as it pertains to um, network strategy. and network sales came up, and it opened up, and I applied, and I am very happy to say I am now in this role. And again, I'm learning a lot, so I am moving even farther away than I was in 1996 with, like trying to plug cables the wrong way and trying to troubleshoot a dynamic routing protocol issue. But here I am, and I love the role I'm currently learning lots, which is what I want.
Yeah, I think you're sort of probably downplaying the role a little bit. I mean, I love the fact we've got someone with your background in that role. As you know, I'm allowed to say this. This is sort of the central figure worldwide for sales strategy for networking at Microsoft, right? It's a super important role, and as I say, having someone with your background is super reassuring to someone like myself and everyone we work with, and hopefully people watching this video. So yeah, thanks a lot for your time, Heather.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, I've been looking forward to this because we talk a lot, right? But we've never really talked about our backgrounds. We've both have got that common point of working for Cisco, and you've been doing this a lot longer than I have. And
Why do I look that old?
yeah, it's the grey beard, and
Okay.
so I'd love to get your perspective on, by now you've watched the video I made, and people watching this have watched the video I made. So maybe just to tee this up, we can talk a little bit about kind of your 5-minute history with the CCIE program.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, congrats on that video, right? I think it was striking a lot of points that sounded familiar, both for myself as for other people that I talked to or I've talked to during this year. So answering your question about my experience with CCI. So I started my networking career 22 years ago at Amadeus, which is a company that have a pretty mission critical data center plus relatively good size wide area network. And that's where I grew, right? With MPLS on one side and advanced or very tight convergence time requirements on the data center. I was there around, or it took me around 6 years to prepare for the CCIE. I did the routing and switching. Again, that was the core of what I was doing at the time. I did it on my second attempt, so I cannot be one of those folks who managed to get it on the first one. I got a 16,000 number, 16,601. I still know that. Yeah, that was kind of my entry ticket for Cisco. Right after 1 year, I moved over to Cisco and I started working on data center technologies. At that time, Cisco was releasing a lot of stuff around the data center, like wide area application services, if that rings a bell for anybody, or the myriad of load balancing products, CSS, CSM, ACE, as well as the new data center flagships that came later in, like UCS and ACI eventually, right, where we've as well worked not together, but on the same field at the same time. So meaning that I was getting more and more away of routing and switching and more into data centers. So every time I had to research my CCIE, I did the data center exam, the data center CCIE exam. Plus, I think it was in 2010, I took a stab at the CCD, which I got with a pretty low number. Still proud of that, 2010 0008. So yeah, I mean, eventually in 2016, I joined Microsoft. Since all my contact I was having with data center technologies, I thought public cloud was a good progression for me. And I've been drifting away from traditional networking in a way to the point where I left my CCIE expire. I think that was 2017 or so, where I didn't see the point in renewing that. So that's my 5-minute story about my CCIE.
I got 3 questions or 3 observations before we get into sort of the real question of the sort of validity of the CCIE in the cloud world. And one is, I didn't realize you had your CCIE before Cisco, and I've always got kind of this respect for people that get it before Cisco or before joining Cisco or not having worked for Cisco, because Cisco kind of throw resources at you and time to get it, and it's much harder to do, in my opinion, outside of Cisco. So yeah, props for that. The CCDE was on my list of things to sort of mention to you. So when you said you're number 8 for CCDE, does that mean you're the 8th person to achieve that?
I think I'm the 8th person to achieve that in 2010.
Right.
I
Okay.
think
Still.
there were not too many before that. I think they released it in 2009 or 8. I'm not sure. But yeah, I'm let's say I have a pretty. I came there in time, not like in CCIE where I came a bit late to the party.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll leave some breadcrumbs for people that want to understand what the CCDE is, but it's kind of let's say it's an even more exclusive club because there's much less of them. But yeah, did you sort of did you pass that first time? Did you get a lot of value from that compared to the IE?
I did pass first time that one. That was no practical, so it was kind of multiple choice one, but 8 hour long, right?
Yeah.
So the thing I remember is that there were 4 or 5 different scenarios, and they were pretty in depth. And when you were going from scenario A to scenario B, you had to completely forget A. When you went to C, you had to completely forget B and A. So I was like at times trying to answer questions. Oh, security is important for these guys. Oh no, that was for the previous one. So for this one is something different. But I'm digressing. Yeah, it was quite hard because there were no preparation materials, and I didn't have a way to prepare for that one other than my previous experience as helping companies as part of Cisco, as well as in my previous company. But yeah, that was a very interesting exam to take. Whether it helped, not sure. My experience is that CCIE still has a stronger brand as CCDE. Maybe others have different experience, but that has been my perception.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. Okay, let's try and get into the meat of the video. And if people clicked on the video trying to answer the question, I'm sort of interested in cloud, but I'm also interested in CCIE, then probably they wanted a discussion around that. So let's try and get into that. So you sort of see my opinion. You've kind of been on that journey, and you've been in cloud quite a while now. It's interesting that you say you've let your CCIE expire completely. You haven't even picked up the emeritus status. So yeah, what would be your opinion on that exam question?
Question. Yeah. So I mean, the fact that I let it expire already speaks volumes about my position on that. I have to say I agree with your video on the it depends part, right? Everybody might have a different goals in their career, so I want to start with a disclaimer: the fact that this doesn't mean that I recommend everybody to do the same. Why did I do this? So when I was going to, this thing was going to, when the CCIE was going to expire, I was confronted with that decision, right? Either I start studying for a theoretical exam to research, or I pay the $85 for the I don't remember what it's called, the emeritus thing, or I let it go. I started even studying for the data center one, and at some point, I realized that it was, for me, in that stage in my career, pointless. I was trying to remember the Nexus commands that I didn't need anymore. I was trying to remember this UCS places in the Fabric things in the UCS manager where you had to click. And then I realized that there were other things that I did need to learn, like Kubernetes networking, like CI/CD, we're working in Microsoft, not only our cloud, but the other clouds. So I decided that that wasn't the most effective way of investing my time, and I let it go.
Yeah, makes complete sense actually. And I mean, I haven't been sort of let's say brave enough to completely let it expire. I know myself and a lot of people view it as it's almost like a safety net. If this cloud thing doesn't work out, well, you can always kind of go and work for a partner. That's why I've gone for the emeritus. But the fact that you let it expire, it sort of, you must have felt kind of like, oh, when that date ticked over, you were like, oh wow, that's like that really is the end of an era.
What's gone? Yeah, exactly.
So maybe another way of answering this question, which would be, if you were a couple of years into your career and you were progressing down the network path, you've done the thing which I always like to see, where you get some grassroots experience, like you work on a help desk or you work as a network admin, and you sort of you enjoy networking. And what I laid out in my video was, at that stage you could kind of go left or right. You could kind of really go into network architecture, maybe work in service provider networking, or maybe you could pivot right. So maybe sort of putting yourself in the shoes of someone early in the career in terms of CCIE and cloud. Does that give you a sort of platform to share any different opinions?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can share my thoughts on that. Firstly, I would like to underline that CCIE doesn't equate to networking, right? Cisco is not all about networking, and that's something I had to learn. Like, for example, the CCIE doesn't cover things like DNS, like digital certificates, like application networking. All those things you need to know if you work in networking. So the networking area is broader than CCIE. It's always been. The point is now it's even broader. At the time we had NS6 coming in, right? I did the VMware certification as well, because that was important for my job as a networking person. Now we have lots of stuff. We have cloud networking across 3 or 4 different clouds. We have Kubernetes everywhere. So in my eyes, the question is, as a professional, where do you want to grow? If you're working at a telco and your daily job is troubleshooting Cisco IOS XE all day long, probably that's going to be a great asset in your career. If your goal is being a bit broader than that, because maybe you're working more in the enterprise that in the telco industry, or your organization has contacts not only with public cloud but as well with private cloud like VMware or Kubernetes or OpenStack. Given the time that the CCIE requires you to invest, I'm not sure if you would have time to learn those other things that are going to be necessary for you as well. So potentially what you might want to do is to come to a certain point, maybe CCNP with Cisco technologies, which is decent, and invest a bit of time in others, right? Like the ones I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Sort of getting that baseline. There's lots more options these days to sort of jump to, and that's one of the things I stated in my video. Okay, well, I think we can close it there. Thanks for taking the time to speak to me. I think if people are watching, irrelevant of if you're interested in CCIE, if you're interested in cloud networking, I'd encourage people to check out your blog, which is called Cloud Trooper. And I would like to ask you something that I don't know, which is, where did that name come from? Is it Star Wars related?
Yeah, it's Star Wars related, what you can see as well in the logo, which is a pretty battered stormtrooper. And yeah, I can't help liking Star Wars, being a fan. And when I was starting that blog, I had always the feeling that I was venting out scars from trying to do something, right? Because mostly what I try to do in that blog is writing things I've come across so that others don't have to go through the same struggle that I did. So that's kind of the reflection, right? Those stormtroopers in Star Wars doing the daily job of fighting against network complexity and potentially succeeding. Yeah, that was a bit of the backstory for that name.
Well, I'd love to take the analogy further and ask, kind of who is the Darth Vader of the networking world today, but we'll leave it there because everyone can agree Star Wars is awesome, and that's a good place to end. So thanks, Jose.
Thank you, Adam. Thanks for having me.